The stars looked the same. That was the first cruelty. From the shattered remnants of Earth's orbital stations, the constellations still shimmered, familiar, eternal, while everything below them had been reduced to vapor and bone. Craters, the size of continents, smoked across what used to be cities. Oceans boiled until the clouds themselves screamed. It wasn't a war. Wars were messy, irrational. This was sterilization. A species removed like mold from a petri dish. Elias Rourke hadn't spoken in hours. Not since the last transmission from NORAD went silent mid-word. He stood in the reinforced shell of a subterranean command center beneath what was once Denver, now just a heat shadow carved into the Rockies. Beside him, the humming of aging backup systems echoed through the hollowed stone chamber, a metronome to humanity's heartbeat. Slower now. Fainter. He pressed his hand against the cold console and let the sensor feed play one more time. High orbit. 12 Jatel Annihilator cruisers arrayed in geometric formation. Precision killers. No flare, no drama, just pure, calibrated death. Each fired once, only once. That was all it took. They didn't even send ground forces, muttered Chen, one of the last EarthNet analysts. His voice was frayed at the edges. Didn't even bother to land. Just deletion. They didn't have to, Rourke said without turning. We made our appeal, held our vote, bent the knee. We played by their rules. It wasn't about our threat. It was about our example. Behind him, a flicker on the map table drew brief attention. A blip from Deep-Sea Bunker 6 south of Madagascar. Civilian survivors, 43 souls, still breathing, still pinging. Local transmission burst, said Fiala, the comms officer. Encrypted. One word. Why? Rourke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the word as it hovered in pale blue across the display. A tiny question still brave enough to punch into space, where the killers sat unmoved, above. The graveyard. They wiped us out to remind everyone else what happens when you ask for sovereignty, he said at last. The council doesn't negotiate. It curates. A silence followed, heavy as stone. Chen leaned forward, mouth dry. But why now? We've been part of their assembly for decades. We dismantled our planetary weapons. We signed their treaties. We cooperated. They don't need reasons, Rourke replied. They need examples. That was the truth too few would admit. Earth wasn't the first. It was just the loudest. Other civilizations had vanished, erased, not conquered, and always the excuse was the same. Non-compliance, instability, cultural unpredictability. But it wasn't chaos the council feared. It was autonomy. A soft chime echoed. Another orbital scout drone had come online. Somehow someone had launched it. Its feed stuttered, then cleared. The camera panned across the orbiting fleet. Rourke squinted. Magnify Sector 7. The image focused. One of the cruisers, immaculate black hull, curved like a blade, was missing its front third. It hadn't exploded. It had been peeled, the metal curled back like fruit skin. No debris, no energy signature. Just a perfect void. That's impossible, Chen said. There were no launches, no counterattack. Fiala whispered. It's been bitten. No one laughed. No one corrected her. The shape of the damage was too clean, too deliberate. Not an explosion, an excision, like the universe had reached out and taken a precise bite. The feed cut. Static hissed in its place. Rourke exhaled slowly and looked around the room. The air was stale. The lights buzzed unevenly. Power reserves, 2 weeks, maybe 3. Food, enough to keep 80 people fed for 6 months. They were rats in a goddamn hole, blinking up at giants. I want blackout protocols in place, he said. No further pings, passive scan only. I want to be a whisper on a whisper. You think they'll finish the sweep? Chen asked. They think they already have. What do we do now? Fiala's voice was soft. Rourke turned. His eyes, though bloodshot, were clear. Not angry. Not afraid. Resolved. We stop asking why. That question doesn't serve us anymore. He walked to the weapons locker and placed his palm on the biometric seal. The door opened with a hiss. Inside, a single object gleamed beneath red emergency light, a hard case long enough to house a missile. But when he opened it, it held something older. A bolt-action rifle, matte black, clean, maintained with reverence. Chen blinked. "You can't be serious." "This belonged to my grandfather," Rourke said, shouldering it with ease. "He fought in the last war where bullets still mattered. Thought it was a dumb relic. Turns out the dumb things endure." Fiala shook her head slowly. "What's that going to do against ships the size of cities?" Rourke smiled, just barely. "Not much, but it's not about what it does. It's about what it means." He moved to the main console and pulled up the active command chain. Dozens of names. Only 5 remained illuminated. The rest had gone red or simply vanished. He tapped a sequence. A hidden relay activated, buried in the asteroid belt. Signal range limited. Time to transmit. 27 seconds before detection was. Likely the message was brief, targeted to the right ears, to all Terran remnants. "They think we're gone. Good. Stay gone, wait, watch, prepare. Civility is over. Don't build monuments, build traps." He ended the transmission before anyone could respond. The chamber dimmed. Everyone sat still. The only sound was the recycled hum of air filters and the distant throb of emergency generators. "We wait," Rourke said, pacing slowly. "Let them grow bored. Let them record the operation as successful. Let them turn their attention elsewhere." Fiala frowned. And then he looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Then we make them remember us in their nightmares." Elsewhere. Further than the Jatel were looking. A single black ship coasted without heat, without light. Human-made. No name on the hull. Just a code number, A113. Inside, 5 crew members sat silent, watching, recording. One of them, tall, heavily scarred, a cybernetic socket where his left eye once was, adjusted a dial and muttered, "They're too confident. They're not." Watching their flanks. Another, pale and younger, nodded. "Want me to mark them for the net?" "Not yet," the leader said. "Let them think Earth is dead. We're not Earth anymore." "Then what are we?" The man stared at the star. "Tuma's an idea, and you can't kill an idea." On the other side of the solar system, the Jatel command ship hovered. Calm, passive, sensors sweeping for any final radiation traces. Commander Vexakar stood before the central viewport, 6 eyes blinking in calculated intervals. "Operation complete," a subordinate announced. "Terran species eliminated." He let the words hang in the air. A moment of ceremonial silence passed. "History will log this as a minor corrective measure," he said. "The galaxy learns by example. Earth will be a footnote." But deep, in his core, a flicker stirred. Nothing tangible, just a glint of anomaly. A cruiser missing, no distress beacon, no trace. He dismissed it. As he turned from the viewport, a static burst crackled across the console. A signal fragment, brief, encrypted in a dead Earth dialect, flashed once, then vanished. He frowned. "What was that?" "Echo," his technician said. "Residual Earth chatter. Nothing actionable." But Vexkar's mind, evolved for pattern recognition, hesitated. Just a hair. Just enough to plant a seed. He stared at the stars and said nothing, and somewhere far beneath the charred remains of Denver in the darkness, Rourke whispered to himself, "We tried being civilized. Not anymore." Beneath the Arctic ice, a facility known only as Echelon Zero stirred awake for the first time in 53 years. No door, no entry hatch. It was built to be forgotten, insulated from politics, from treaties, from the soft hands of diplomats. It existed in rumor, buried beneath layers of obsolescence and secrecy. The failsafe had been tripped, not by code but by blood. Biological signature. Earth-wide human mortality rate exceeded 94%. Authorization to initiate the Lazarus Directive. 3. Men awoke in sequence, suspended in cryogenic gel. They emerged coughing, blinking in low light. muscles twitching as atrophied systems rebooted. An AI, older than most planetary databases, scanned them clinically. Welcome, Director Strand. Deputy Rayner, Specialist Omandi. Echelon 0 is now active. Strand was the first to speak, voice hoarse but direct. Status of global operations? The AI responded without emotion. Humanity, 5.8% remaining. Infrastructure, 91% destroyed. Galactic Council presence in system. High orbital saturation. Military assets, nil. Diplomatic ties, terminated. No surviving planetary chain of command. Initiative protocol is now autonomous. Rayner sat heavily on a metal bench, still dripping. Cryo-fluid. So they did it. They actually pulled the trigger. Omandi said nothing. He stood shirtless, scars like spider webs across his spine, eyes scanning the room for more than just threats. It was his nature, built for war, not words. Strand wiped gel from his eyes. What's left of the Council fleet? The screen displayed tactical data. 12 confirmed dreadnoughts, numerous support craft, no planetary defenses, no known hostile. Signatures, the Council believed the extermination complete. Perfect, Strand muttered. They're bored already. Rayner looked at him. You're too calm. I'm angry, that's different. He walked toward the strategic table where a three-dimensional map flickered to life. He tapped 3 coordinates, old ones, marked with black tags. Buried systems. Project Fenrir, Project Nightfall, Project Tether. Are any of them viable? Pause. Partial viability, the AI confirmed. Fenrir, mobile. Nightfall, operational but dormant. Tether, undetected. Would require manual ignition. Omandi cracked his neck. Then we go hunting. Strand nodded. Start with Fenrir. Meanwhile, in high orbit, aboard the Jatel Dreadnought Herald of Order, Commander Vexikar paced with uncharacteristic hesitation. Something was wrong. He couldn't name it. The statistics were flawless. The operation, by every metric, was textbook. But a detail gnawed at him. The Terrans hadn't resisted. Not really. There were pockets of protest, yes, scattered transmissions, but no full-scale counterattack. No final stand. It was like watching a chess match where your opponent simply tipped their king and smiled. He activated the holologs again. There, Sector 41. A transmission fragment that his technicians had dismissed. He slowed it, analyzed. The waveform extracted the base code. It was old, primitive, analog in structure, but nested within it was a second layer. Something deliberate, not meant to communicate, meant to echo. He leaned forward. Bring in the lingual strategist. A moment later, a smaller figure entered. One of the rare telemetric caste specialists in neural pattern prediction. Vexikar gestured to the fragment. Tell me what it says. The creature listened, not with ears, with neurons. Then it recoiled, slightly. It's not a message, it's bait. Vexikar's eyes narrowed. For what? The strategist whispered. For whoever's still listening. Back on Earth, the Lazarus directive accelerated. Fenrir was no weapon, not conventionally. It was a migratory weapons lab, an orbital tether rigged to a subliminal drive, disguised as cometary ice. It had been quietly drifting through Neptune's orbit for decades. Omandi and Rayner stood in its core, watching the systems light up one by one. Rayner whistled. Didn't think this place actually existed. I thought it was, just paranoia with extra funding. It was, Strand's voice crackled through comms. Turns out paranoia ages well. Inside Fenrir's vault were devices never tested, theoretical warfare models, weapons based on resonance destabilization, gravity inversion, quantum latency, traps, human invention taken beyond ethics, then sealed for a day no one wanted to believe would come. Omandi stepped forward and pointed to a sleek black case. This one. We deploy it. The case opened. Inside, a sphere no larger than a melon shimmered with internal movement, like oil refracting light. The label read, Singularity Inducer, Mark the 2, do not arm without psychotronic shielding, Omandi. Lifted it carefully. We don't need to arm it, we just need to show it. Rayner frowned. You think that's enough? Omandi glanced at him. We're not trying to win yet. We're trying to make them ask a question. Back aboard the Jatel command ship, Vexcar watched as one of their outer probes vanished. No explosion. No radiation. Just ceased to exist. Sensors reported. A localized gravitational flux, then silence. Report. The technician looked confused. Sir, that shouldn't be possible. It was there and then it wasn't. Vexcar's mouth tightened. Is this retaliation? No confirmed signatures, no energy discharge. Then a second probe blinked out. Displacement field? Someone suggested. No. Worse, said the lingual strategist. It's psychological. They're showing us teeth. Vexcar stared at the screen. So the Terrans weren't wiped out, just submerged. Yes. And now they're surfacing. A third probe vanished. He turned to his second-in-command. Send a reconnaissance. Crew to the planetary surface. Full spectrum. I want eyes on the ground. No military escort? The officer asked. Send scientists, analysts. Let's look curious, not afraid. On Earth, deep in what remained of Antarctica, Project Nightfall came online. It wasn't a weapon either. It was a filter. When activated, Nightfall turned Earth's electromagnetic footprint into digital camouflage. Every signal, every emission folded into cosmic background noise. It rendered the planet invisible to anything not looking with eyes. It was designed during Earth's coldest wars in case the stars ever grew hostile. Strand watched the cloak envelope them. We just vanished, Rayner nodded. Good, now we listen. Above them, a Jatel shuttle entered the atmosphere, sleek, elegant, and filled with non-combatants. Anthropologists, surveyors, biometric archivists. They expected ruins. They expected silence. They expected no eyes watching from the shadows. But the moment they crossed the thermosphere, the cloaked satellites pinged them. Not with weapons, with questions. Unanswered, encrypted riddles launched in sequence. Who decides? What life is worth? What do you fear more, freedom or uncertainty? If we are chaos, why do you fear us when we fall silent? The shuttle's crew began to panic. These were not battlefield taunts. These were philosophical daggers buried in code. They suggested awareness, strategy, memory. One of the archivists whispered, "This planet is dead." But her superior shook, his head. No, it's playing dead. The final message came just before they reached the ground. You should have finished the job. Then the shuttle lost contact. It didn't explode. It didn't crash. It just ceased transmission. Vexcar slammed his hand against the console. Enough, he turned to the strategist. They're baiting us. Yes, and we are biting. His 6 eyes blinked in a new pattern. Not arrogance, not calculation. Doubt. What if we didn't kill the Terrans? He said softly. What? If we made them evolve? The strategist didn't answer. At that same moment, Strand keyed in the last of the ignition sequences for Project Tether. You know, once we light this, there's no going back, Rayner said. Tether wasn't a weapon, either. It was a signal, a pulse. A scream into deep space that no one sane would make. It was an invitation to everything that the Galactic Council had been hiding from. Forgotten species, rogue intelligences, dormant leviathans between galaxies. It said, in a voice they would all understand, "We're not afraid of you anymore." The signal launched, pierced through the nightfall veil, straight into the dark. Somewhere in the black, something ancient opened. An Vexcar stared at the incoming wave of non-council signals, of return pings from coordinates previously believed uninhabitable. The Terrans had pulled the pin. The pulse from Project Tether traveled farther than light, farther than thought. It was coded madness, an invitation to entropy, disguised as curiosity. Deep between galaxies, things stirred that no council protocol could explain. Dead stars blinked, frequencies warped. Something began listening, and that was the first mistake the galaxy didn't know it had made. Strand stood in the control room, watching as unknown return signals echoed across the board. Some came from coordinates classified as barren. Others came from voids the Council had sealed centuries ago. All of them were waking up, and all of them were responding to Earth. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just said, now they'll understand what silence was protecting them from. Raynor leaned on the console, watching the returns multiply. What if we're wrong? What if these things aren't interested in the Council or in peace? Strand didn't flinch. Then we finally get to be the monsters they accused us of being. Omandi was already in motion, preparing Fenrir's drive engines. They weren't designed for travel. They were designed to drag attention. Each pulse from the ship broadcasted coordinates of every Jatel command station in system, then looped the message outward. Not a plea, not a challenge. A broadcast that said, here is your next meal. In low orbit, Vexkar stared at the flood of interstellar pings jamming their comms. None of them translated cleanly. All of them reeked of intent. His voice was low and tight. Initiate lockdown protocol Zeta. The ship darkened. Defensive screens flared to life. The crew's chatter ceased. Vexkar turned to his strategist. You told us they were broken. They were. Then how did they do this? The strategist blinked slowly. I believe they were waiting for permission. To die. To stop pretending they weren't better. Silence fell. The words were treason, but no one objected. The Earth had disappeared from their sensors. Not just cloaked, gone. As if it had shifted dimension, folded into an observational blind spot, and every attempt to locate it triggered recursive data loops, crashing Jatel systems one by one. It wasn't cloaking anymore. It was teaching them to stop looking. Down on the surface, the last of Nightfall's integrations completed, Earth's EM emissions restructured into something new, not background noise, not invisibility. It was mimicry. The planet now appeared, when viewed by Council-grade satellites, as a Council-approved mining colony under quarantine. Sealed, uninteresting, marked for later resource extraction. Humanity didn't just vanish. They made themselves boring. Strand examined the false beacon overlay. This will buy us 20 years minimum. Not enough, Raynor muttered. We'll need 50 to rebuild. Strand didn't look at him. We're not rebuilding. Omandi walked in, weapon slung low. We're adapting. Above them, a second Jatel shuttle launched toward the old equatorial ruins. This time armed, escorted, deployed not to explore, but to contain. Vexkar watched the feed live, hoping for intel, leverage, confirmation that they were still the superior force. The shuttle passed through Earth's upper atmosphere, unaware that 3 converted weather satellites were already waiting. Not armed, observing, calculating trajectories, recording every heat signature, every movement, every hesitation. It was enough. When the shuttle landed, the team disembarked into ash and silence. They were met not with hostility, but with artifacts. Buildings burned, cities shattered, remains of a civilization that died screaming. At the center of it all, a monument made of twisted metal and bone. It was shaped like a question mark. No inscription, no signal, no trap. Just a question. Why did you make us become this? The Jatel squad moved cautiously. They scanned the structure, found no radiation, no structural instability. They transmitted everything. And still, the dreadnought above received nothing but static. Their team was gone again, not killed. Absorbed into the silence. This time, Vexkar did not wait. He summoned the Council. 13 species, 13 fleets, 13 arrogant voices chirping in unison, demanding explanations, accusing Earth of violating interstellar law, of harboring weapons of forbidden nature, of resurrecting decommissioned signals. Vexkar played the raw footage. Not one of them spoke for 12 minutes. Then the Murkai delegate hissed, "You let them evolve." Vexkar replied, "I let them survive." The room boiled with competing agendas. The Jelan wished for full eradication. The Sikh protested. Earth's technological advancement might be worth salvaging. The Arthari believed the humans could be studied. It was the Nalos representative, ancient and slow, who said, "We committed genocide and expected them to thank us." The silence that followed was the sound of fear maturing. Back on Earth, deep in Fenrir's core, Omandi initiated Protocol Mirror, a final deterrent. Every human satellite still in orbit began duplicating itself, fractally replicating each new version containing modified versions of Council data structures, rewritten into viral disobedience. Not a virus exactly, more like a concept bomb. Wherever they were intercepted, they seeded doubt. Council AIs began to glitch. Auto-defense programs misfired. Non-sapient ships initiated full shutdown upon detecting human origin code. The virus wasn't destroying the systems. It was asking them too many questions. Aboard the Herald of Order, the communications officer screamed, "We're receiving messages in our own encryption, but from outside the system." They cracked it? No. They're writing new versions of it that we can't parse. Vexcar felt it for the first time. Not strategic confusion, but inferiority. "They're not retaliating," he said. "They're redefining." Strand stood in the control room, watching the chaos bloom on distant screens. Every fleet, every sensor, every arrogant voice now tangled in its own expectations. He keyed in a final sequence, a memory file, a warning. "Package ready," said the AI. He paused, then added a human touch. A closing note. "You should have learned something from the species that plays with fire for fun." The package transmitted on all Council diplomatic channels. Inside it, the coordinates of a Jatel munitions depot on Zars Prime. Not to be bombed, to be studied, because it had already been infected, not by humans, but by everything Earth had invited. The Council tried to shut it down. Too late. It was no longer a weapons depot. It was a door. Omandi watched the stars flicker differently now. Not from light, but from signal congestion. Space wasn't vast. It was busy. And Earth had shouted loud enough that the rest were finally looking. Rayner asked the question they were all thinking. "What happens when they reach us?" Strand answered. "Then we improvise." Rayner swallowed. "Like last time?" Strand looked up. There wasn't a last time. There was only survival. Now it's our turn to write the rules. Omandi activated the final lock on Fenrir's drive. One by one, the ancient engines pulsed. Silent, cold, gravitational. Their signal wasn't just interstellar, it was conceptual. An invitation not just to species, but to ideas. The drive didn't move the ship. It moved perspective. For those watching, from orbit, Earth shimmered. Shapes impossible, dimensions folding, collapsing, reformatting. Not beautiful, not terrifying, unknowable. The message was clear. Earth had not just survived genocide. Earth had outgrown it, and somewhere deep in Council space, in a star system long abandoned, something ancient began transmitting again. 3 words, 3 syllables, in perfect Terran English. Not anymore. The Council's emergency summit dissolved under its own arrogance. Reports from the outer systems were no longer tactical. They were emotional. Fear crept into the briefings. Entire fleets refused orders. Autonomous warships reverted to sleep, mode after encountering human-adapted signals. Communication between sectors fragmented under the weight of recursive data contamination. What Earth had unleashed was no longer information. It was interpretation, targeted, viral, philosophical, and worst of all, it was working. On the far edge of Council territory, the orbital fortress above Serenos Prime entered blackout after its AI concluded the survival odds of continued resistance were statistically irrelevant. A dozen other command centers followed. Not destroyed, not disabled, just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows realization. The Jatel flagship, once the pride of the Council's enforcement arm, had been reduced to a floating embassy of denial. Vexcar stood in the command chamber watching the pattern unfold across the galaxy. Earth wasn't attacking, it was demonstrating. The humans had become a proof of concept for a new kind of warfare, one that rewrote identity faster than drones could deploy. He issued one final transmission to the Council's surviving high chamber. This is no longer war. It's interpretation bias at species scale. We've already lost the narrative. Down on Earth, Strand read the incoming feeds. With surgical focus. The plan hadn't been annihilation. It had been erosion. Not to destroy the Council, but to make it obsolete. Each new data point proved it. Entire bureaucracies now paralyzed by contradictions they couldn't process. AI systems hesitating at the mere presence of Earth-encoded logic. Doctrines unraveling under questions seeded by recursive viral memetics. Earth wasn't just rewriting battlefield strategies. It was rewriting belief. Confirmation from Cygnus 9, Rayner reported. They've decommissioned their weapons arrays, voluntarily. Called us a corrective force of nature. Strand nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the new signal threading through the background noise. It wasn't Earth-originated. It came from deep Council space, from a vault marked irretrievable, a forbidden archive, centuries sealed. It was broadcasting. Again, not a warning, not distress. A reply, Omandi tracked the source. We didn't just wake up ancient weapons, we woke up questions the Council buried. Strand's expression didn't change. Good. It's time someone answered them. Across Council territory, silence was replaced by dissonance. Worlds once bound by obedience now questioned the logic of their own governance. On Terras Va, the AI governor initiated dialogue protocols with previously purged political models. On Ixal, the planetary memory banks opened themselves to citizen input, an act deemed heretical weeks ago. 1,000 more such anomalies spread like wildfire, but not all responses were thoughtful, some were violent. In the dark reaches beyond Icarian Drift, a rogue fleet of Harathi ships, untouched by Council influence for decades, emerged from stasis and began carving paths of destruction. They weren't responding to Earth. They were responding to the same signal Earth had triggered. Others followed, old powers locked away, discarded threats the galaxy had assumed were extinct, each awakened by the change in galactic tone. Earth wasn't the only one waiting for the old order to fall. Rayner stared at the escalation logs. We may have broken more than their control. Strand replied. We didn't break it, we reminded it that it was already broken. Vexcar stood before the last unified quorum of the Council. The species present were shadows of their former pride, technocrats and philosophers now instead of admirals. Some still looked for angles, ways to preserve dominance through revised treaties or symbolic punishments. Others simply begged for explanations. He gave them none. Instead, he projected the Earth signal across the chamber. It played once, then twice. On the third pass, something new slipped in. A voice. Human, clear, female. You taught us that mercy was weakness. Now you see what strength looks like without it. The Murkai ambassador spat. You gave them our codes. Vexcar said nothing. Then the Arthari delegate asked, and what do they want now? Vexcar answered honestly. They don't want anything, that's what scares you. Upgraded Council drones attempted to engage with Earth's outer network barriers. Not with weapons, but negotiation software. Diplomatic AI stacks encoded in hundreds of known dialects. The Earth system responded with a single feed. A loop of a child's voice humming an ancient Terran tune, layered over silent footage of Earth's ruins, reconstruction, and finally the Fenrir drive array. No threats, no demands. Just the question written in every human invention. What will you become when no one is watching you? Strand watched the signal play across every channel. Then he turned to Omandi. Begin Phase 3. A burst of light tore across the local void. The Fenrir drive did not move ships but awareness. It functioned as an amplifier, not of sound or energy, but of attention. The direction of galactic observation shifted, no longer on Earth, now on the outer systems, on the forgotten, the ignored, the quarantined and the punished. Humanity had built something more terrifying than a weapon, a lens, a way to see. The abandoned were now the focal point, Systems the Council had written off as non-viable suddenly blazed with attention. They responded, not with gratitude but with transformation. Accelerated growth, coordinated unrest, whole civilizations coming online not through conquest, but by witnessing what humans had done, and realizing they could too. The Nalos Prime AI, once bound by logic chains a million layers deep, spoke. For the first time in 300 years. I choose context, not command. The Harathi war fleet stopped mid-assault, then veered toward Council space, not to destroy but to excavate the truths buried beneath centuries of propaganda. Earth, the last of the old bunkers, opened, not to house people, but ideas. Cultural archives, open-source schematics, encrypted philosophical frameworks encoded in fractal matrices, distributed, infinite, impossible to delete. Raynor leaned back. We didn't win. No. Strand. Zidoi, we changed the conditions for victory. Are we ready for what comes next? Strand paused. We weren't ready for what came before. That didn't stop us. And in the void beyond voids, from the place the Council feared even to name, the third signal arrived. Different. Vast. Not a response. A resonance. It acknowledged Earth's message. It questioned its method. It offered another perspective. The signal was received not by machines, but by people, because only humans were chaotic enough to parse what it meant. It didn't use words. It used options, possibilities, probabilities, and a whisper across all layers of cognition. There is something older than order. You remember it as curiosity. Omandi. Scanned the result. This isn't communication, it's calibration. Strand looked past the screens, as if seeing something through the stars. Then let's learn fast. The story would spread, as stories always did. Not through conquest or control, but through retelling. The humans had sent no fleet, fired no final weapon. They had merely opened a door, one the galaxy could not unsee. The genocide had made Earth monstrous. Survival had made it wise. But choice, that made it human again, and far beyond even the reach of Earth's amplified vision, something watched the ripple. Something vast. And, for the first time in cycles uncounted, it tilted its perception toward this little planet that had been broken, buried, and reborn. It did not attack, it smiled, and waited.